We're going to be talking about ELT data integrations. Got an agenda that we'll go through here in a second. But I wanted to get a quick pulse check on where folks are coming from who've attended today. And so I'm going to ask just a couple questions. And if you could raise your hands, that'd be awesome. So if you've ever built like a data integration before, can you raise your hand? Self-qualify yourself? Okay, awesome. So you guys are in the right place. You're going to get a lot of the context I have. Are you familiar with ELT, or like the newer approach versus ETL? Can I get a raise of hands? Awesome, sweet, good, because those are some things I didn't want to have to dive too deep into, but will be helpful for the conversation. And then lastly, who here is familiar with Airbyte at all? Great, awesome. I hope we're going to have a lot more hands up to that after this presentation, but let's go ahead and dive in. Hello, my name is Was, short for Wasserman. I'm a solutions engineer at Airbyte. Been at the company for about a year and a half. Been in the ad tech, data integrations, data platform space for the last 8 years, working with petabyte scale data. And something's up with the aspect ratio a bit, so hopefully that's not too much. But today I'm going to talk with you about a couple topics. We're going to briefly just level set on what ELT is. We're going to give a brief overview on Airbyte and our value prop. And then we're going to dive into 3 topics that I'm very excited to share with you. These are all new since I was here last year, where I was at this conference. And yeah, I think it's going to be hopefully very meaningful to you guys. But we have our Powered by Airbyte solution, which is an extensible integration as a service. We have our Terraform provider, which we launched recently, so you can dive into CI/CD pipelines. And then we're actually going to do a quick demo, and it might take up the majority of the session, of the GitHub of building a custom connector with Airbyte. We've recently launched our connector builder, and so it's all UI driven, and I'm going to show you how quick it is to build a new connector and deploy it into the platform. Cool? Awesome. So yeah, a little off center, that's okay. ELT, the way I rationalize why the switch to ELT occurred is largely due to the advent of cloud computing, where storage and compute became a lot cheaper, allowing users to be greedier with their data, bring more data over, and then utilizing these ever increasingly powerful data warehouses to do a lot of that complex aggregation, transformation actually at the destination. Obviously, there's a lot of people still using data lakes and doing, Spark data processing, multi-node processing. That stuff hasn't gone away for like machine learning and whatnot. But a lot of the use cases that used to be done that way no longer need to be done that way, and it removes a lot of the complexity, a lot of the maintenance when you can decouple those things and use standard, programming tools like SQL to do these transformations at the destination, rather than injecting some complex code and it being pretty fragile. So that's a level set on ELT. Again, a little off center, but for a typical or a very basic stack, what that would look like today is something where you have Airbyte replicating directly from a number of sources that you want to centralize in your data warehouse. Then you may have a dbt or another transformation tool actually building that data mart or denormalized table structure, if you will, interacting directly with Snowflake. And then maybe some activation use cases could be like visualization. So you have dashboards for leadership, or you sell analytics products to consumers, which we're going to talk about briefly today. You have visualization tools. A growing segment is this concept of reverse ETL, doing those aggregations, getting that learning and that insight and pushing it back to applications like Salesforce, something Airbyte's going to be getting into in the near future, but we actually do this today with like high touch and census, so and get all that insightful data back into like Salesforce, for example. And so what is Airbyte? We're not the only data integrator, data loader, data ingestion tool in the space, but I think our 3 key differentiators are that we're born open source, and because of that, we provide a lot of tooling to developers to contribute back to the product. And with things like our development kits, either Python, Java, our low-code YAML framework, and the connector builder I'm going to show you today, we've grown our catalog to over 350 connectors to various APIs and databases where you can, and a platform on top of which you can replicate to your data warehouses and whatnot. All through that like participative model and the ability to contribute easily back to the product. We're also very extensible, non-opinionated, we like to say, so we'll fit whatever shape you need for a tool like us to be in. We're going to go through a couple of those today with the API suite that we have available, with the Terraform provider we just launched, but you can choose to be in or entirely out of the UI should you want. You can use us in a CI/CD pipeline. You're going to be able to interact with Airbyte in many ways depending on how you want a tool like this to behave. And then lastly, most popularly, fair usage-based pricing. Open source is free, so you actually can download, deploy Airbyte on EC2 or Kubernetes using Docker or Kubernetes, or you can use our SaaS product, Airbyte Cloud. That we're going to build based on just transparent record-based pricing for APIs, gigabytes for databases, no monthly aggregates, no tracking of primary keys. It's just how much data you replicate on a record or gigabyte level you pay for. Awesome. With that stuff out of the way, we'll just do a quick, I always like to start these sessions with a bit of a look at the architecture to demonstrate what is so special about Airbyte. In my opinion, it all comes down to the data exchange protocol down there at the connector layer. Ultimately, what people like to geek out on Airbyte for is our specification. It's the basic foundation and fundamental units of how do you replicate data from a source to a destination. And as long as you build connectors that fit that specification, our catalog can grow endlessly. And that's what we've seen, right? We provide the tools to developers, we give them the instructions with our specification, and they can build connectors very easily and deploy them either in their own instance or contribute them back to the repository. And then on top of that sits the platform layer. That's going to be basic fundamental orchestration needs that one requires to do data replication. We still work very nicely with more performant orchestrators like Airflow and Dagster, but you get some basic out-of-the-box functionality with us, things like being able to schedule jobs either at a frequency basis or a cron. You can manage the configuration, so you can log into multiple accounts, log into a subset of accounts. You can manage the state, so like we do micro-batch processing, meaning we're going to do an initial historical sync first, and then subsequently we'll pick up where we left off using a cursor field and do incremental, smaller micro-batch syncs subsequently. And then what's great is the way you interact Airbyte is ultimately always going to be through an API. We have a UI that sits on top of it, but because of this, it's fully extensible in the sense that you can work with API endpoints and extend it into your own product. We have our Terraform provider as well as a command line interface tool that's been homegrown that you can use to manage it through like a CLI environment or a CI/CD environment as well. And it's fully deployable on anywhere you can deploy Kubernetes or Docker. So, powered by Airbyte, we're going to talk about this briefly, but effectively, this is something we're really excited about, where because our API suite allows you to fully manage your Airbyte integrations outside of the UI, you can use them to fulfill a use case we called Powered by Airbyte, where you effectively embed integration services from Airbyte into your own product and expose connector creation to your users, and immediately have 350 connectors available to you out of the box without really lifting a finger besides just integrating those APIs. And so you can imagine a use case where you sell an analytics product to a user, right? Call it like a marketing attribution dashboard for the product that you're helping them with. You can expose a Google Ads or a Bing Ads or a Salesforce connector to that user to authenticate. And then once that is done, behind the scenes, you've set up either through SDK or other automation the ability to templatize how that data is actually going to get pulled from their source to your destination and automate things like either scheduled tasks in Snowflake or trigger scheduled queries in BigQuery and automatically create those insights in that product for those users so that they consume them. And you don't have to spend any time building those integrations yourself. You get to focus on actually extracting that value for the users and providing that value directly to them and let us take care of that. So you'll have these docs after and be able to link to them, but yeah, cool. So that's our Powered by Airbyte product. Then recently we've launched our Terraform provider, which effectively allows you to embed Airbyte in configuration as code tools such as Terraform and Hashi language, and allow you ultimately to do things like create a CI/CD pipeline for your data integrations using Airbyte, which I think is fairly unique. So a use case you can envision is rather than having your team of very technical engineers go into a UI and build things, they can actually raise pull requests against a Terraform main file that defines a bunch of Airbyte resources, and then have that pull request reviewed and then subsequently merged to a master Git repository, and then have things like GitHub Actions ultimately trigger the apply that generates the instantiates the connections and then generates triggers the connections at the platform level inside Airbyte. But again, you're doing this all through like software development best practices, and you get a nice clean version control. You can revert back to previous versions if you don't want to, if you want to readdress changes that you made, things like that. And so we've seen a lot of excitement there. Right now we support all the apply commands. Coming very soon, you're going to be able to do import functionality as well, which we're really excited about because it's going to allow users to very easily point to a workspace and import all of the resources that they've already defined either through like UI work or API work, and then have that exist as a state that they can then commit to maybe another deployment. Say you want to upgrade to Airbyte Cloud, say you want to actually revert or change to a self-managed deployment on Airbyte open source. The beauty of it is once we have that import functionality, it's going to be very portable for you guys. Oh, that was on a trigger. And last but not least, awesome, good, right on schedule, because we're going to spend a bit more time specifically on the connector builder. But a little bit of a story as it relates to connector development with Airbyte. Our longest standing development kit we've provided users is our Python and Java development kits. Those are going to generate 75% of the code needed to build a connector against our specification. But we've always strived to provide better tooling to allow connector creation easier, faster, and lower maintenance. And with that, earlier this year, we launched our low-code YAML framework. So you can create connectors against our specification using very simple YAML, as if you're form filling. But more recently, in I think spring this year, we launched our connector builder. That's a bit of a game changer, and if you're familiar with tools like Postman or other UI-based API tools, effectively what we've created is an ability to build connectors directly in a UI and then publish them to your workspace and commit them to your production environment, all without having to write any code or to create any Docker images. It's all going to be done directly in your Airbyte workspace. You're going to be able to do this you are able to do this today, both in open source and cloud as well. So I'm pretty stoked on it. Don't take my word for it. Here's some testimonials. Andreas seems to think it's like magic. I kind of agree with them, but don't take Andreas' word for it either. Take this awesome chart that I like to show people. This is the adoption curve of the tool. So since we launched it back in April, you can see the growth we've seen as far as number of active connector builders built with this tool. our active connectors built with this tool on a weekly basis has just been tremendous. And yeah, we're just trying to get more people exposed to it so that they can check it out and see how powerful it is. So without further ado, because we're about halfway through, we're actually going to go into a demo of this right now. But if you're not familiar, this is the Airbyte platform. Couple of housekeeping items. We operate in a multi-tenant architecture, if you will. So this is a workspace. You have access to multiple workspaces. I'm demonstrating this on Airbyte Cloud, but everything I show you today is going to be available on open source as well. I've already created this connector just to make sure that it works, but we're going to go ahead and start from scratch. We're going to create a GitHub connector. We already have a GitHub connector in our catalog that is certified. I'm just doing this one because it highlights some key functionality that we like to demonstrate around injecting custom query parameters to supporting incremental syncing, which I think is really crucial to make these connectors work in a production environment. But you'll see a connector builder icon here. You may have to go to /connector builder in open source, but it's ultimately going to take you to this space. Here's where you're going to be able to effectively start creating connectors and version controlling connectors, managing those connectors. So here I've already published a few. I have versions that I can actually revert if I wanted to. Say I committed and I wanted to actually revert back. We have some of those basic software development principles available to you here, and you can add notes. But when you start from scratch, ultimately you're going to be presented with a couple of options. Again, behind the scenes is all YAML, so you can actually take YAML from other connectors and import them here. You can export these connectors and push them into your open source environment if you wanted to, vice versa. You can load an existing connector that you've already been working on, or you can start from scratch. So we're going to go ahead and start from scratch. You're going to go ahead and supply a name, so we're going to call this GitHub Big BDO, Big Data London, and basically the first thing we're going to do is define that top level URL. So we're going to do https://api.github.com, right? And once you have that base URL defined, you're going to go ahead and provide an authentication method. We support a number of key authentication methods out of the box. I know GitHub is a bearer token authentication method, so I'm just going to go ahead and select that. As you can see in the right-hand corner, I've been notified, okay, you need to get a user-defined parameter called API key. I can go ahead and provide that. I have it saved here in my 1Password, so I'm going to go GitHub, right? And I go here, copy, paste, boom. And then now I'm ready to start actually creating streams. And streams are synonymous with endpoints for API sources. If you're working with databases, a stream is going to refer to a specific table. And then, so you just add here. It's going to ask you to name. So we're going to do list issues because I like this one. And then you're going to define your URL path. So this is where you're probably going to be working directly with some documentation from the API. This is the endpoint that I want to hit, list repository issues. It's going to go ahead and take this URL path. It's saying, hey, you need to provide, you need to hit the repos endpoint with a specific owner and a specific repo, and then /issues, and you're going to be able to get all those issues for that repo. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. What we're going to do here is provide this here, but obviously we need a specific organization, we need a specific repo. What's great is we can do that through user input values, and so you can right here define new ones. So I want to define, I believe organization is first, right? And you can ask it to provide, you can ask it to like apply some conditions if you wanted to, but we're going to go ahead and use the default value so I don't have to keep typing this in. Our repo, our organization is Airbyte HQ. Go there, give us some stars, please. Airbyte HQ. Awesome, we can go ahead and create that. See, it's going to fill it in right here. Don't forget, we need to add subsequently the repo name. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another user input. I'm going to go ahead and create it here. We want repository, right? And we're going to go ahead and do a default value. The repo in question is our public Airbyte repository. So we're just going to do that by default. Airbyte, cool. And then we can't forget to do /issues finally. And then that's going to be it. And so that is really all you need to now start making actual requests. So I've already supplied my testing criteria. What we're going to see is you make, we provide a really awesome testing suite. So you can see the raw requests that you're making to GitHub. You can see the raw response you're getting back. And then as you start to fit the output to the Airbyte specification is where the magic really starts happening. So everything is going to be listed in the body of the response. That usually you have a record selector. So if this was going under something like issues list, you would provide issues here. But because it's straight in the body, a list of items that are the issues, we're going to go ahead and just leave it as null. The primary key here is going to be ID, really simple, right? So you just do that, hit tab. All the while you can see that we're translating this in this first column to actual Airbyte records, actual Airbyte specified records. And then you just continue to work with the API to further define that, increase efficiencies. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working our way towards adding what we call like incremental syncing. So to do that, we need to identify a cursor, and then we need to be able to inject that cursor. We need to pull that cursor in from the response and inject a new cursor value back to the API. So it says, hey, I synced up to yesterday already. Please only give me new data since yesterday. And luckily, this endpoint at GitHub allows us to do that. So the first thing we want to do, though, is sort the response that we get back. And so we're going to sort it based on this column or this output updated. So basically, we're telling the API, hey, please sort the data from the updated column in the direction descending so that we're going to get all new data first. And right, if you go ahead and click test, it's a very iterative process. It's going to go ahead and start doing that, which is great. So we got all our new data first. You have some pagination options with GitHub. We supply a number of key pagination capabilities out of the box, whether that's offset, page increment, or cursor. So if they give you back a URL in the response and that means the next page you need to go to, we support that. I know for GitHub, though, that they're going to do page-based. And so you define the page size. The max can be 100. We're going to start from page 1. Do they allow me to inject that into the query parameter? Yes, I believe the page size can be injected into the parameter as per page. So I'm going to make requests moving forward saying, hey, give me 100 responses per page or 100 items per page. And then if you want to inject the page number, that gets injected under the parameter page. And so we can go ahead and click test. Working. So we're getting a much bigger response now because we've enabled pagination, so it's going to get many issues. And you can see I've got 100 records response. I have multiple pages of issues that we can work with. And now I'm starting to think, okay, we're able to get that historical sync, right? It's going through all of those pages, waiting until there's fewer than 100 records, and then assuming, hey, okay, that's all of the data for this batch of requests. And then but we don't want to do that every single time, right? We want to do incremental syncing. We want to be able to supply a cursor. That cursor is going to be updated at. What's really nice about the tool is that we'll recommend based on what we've seen. So we've added some auto detection, which is going to be super helpful, particularly here. So I can go ahead and say updated at. Boom. They can automatically detect the format and say, hey, do you want to just use this Python datetime format that we detected for you? Say, yeah, please apply it. And then it's saying, how does the API like to accept datetime? Can it be a range, like start and end date, or do they just supply a start date? I know here it's going to be a start date. We're going to go ahead and inject that into a query parameter as the value since. And then we're going to be able to now test, but because it's a user-defined parameter start date, it's asking me to insert some additional testing keys. I'm going to just say September 1st. Go ahead and click save. And then we can go ahead and click start. And then again, it's going to do that initial sync. But assuming I did this right, it should still be successful. And then give it a sec. Awesome. And I only got 5 more minutes left, and I want to leave time for questions, but ultimately what we've done here is we started from absolute scratch, created a connector that's pulling from all the issues that you have for a specific GitHub repository, and it's going to do it incrementally. So after that first historical sync, we're going to do subsequent incremental micro batch processes. And then if you wanted to further customize it, we have functionality like the ability to partition data. So this is really cool. Say there was another endpoint called issue labels, but it requires an issue ID to inject. You can use what's called substream partitioning, where you actually reference the response from a different stream and use that as part of your request parameter, which is super powerful because then you're able to like do very programmatic trolling of API endpoints. There is error handling, so if you know the connector behaves in a particular way, you can choose to do stuff based on like a predefined back-off strategy, or if there's specific codes that you want to handle in certain ways, you can do so here. And then lastly, we offer some basic transformations where you can remove or even hash columns. So an important reminder I forgot to mention, a lot of these are all just Jinja templates, so you can inject very simple Python into these and do transformations on the fly to get like specified values if you wanted to. But then once you're done, it's ultimately is just a matter of publishing this to a workspace, which we can do here. Usually give it a response. It's published. Rather than start an initial sync, ultimately, we'll just take a look at the one I've already created, but you have this custom connector called GitHub. You can see the way it's behaving. I just did a reset. I was able to get that historical sync of my 5,000 issues. The next sync was 2 minutes long. And yeah, that's it. We're over at, I think, booth 724, 725. So please come by, chat with us more. Happy to do more specific demos. Available now here for questions if you want. I know we're at time in about 3 minutes. So thank you very much for attending. Thanks for checking out Airbyte. Again, I'm Was. Let me know if you have any questions. And then I do remember, we have a happy hour later today. There's a QR code here for you if you want to join. Go ahead and scan it, and hopefully we'll see you guys there. Otherwise, we're over in the booth in the corner, Airbyte. I think it's 725. Come check us out. But yeah, here if you have any questions. Sweet.